All right, welcome to Chapter 6's video lecture. This is on ecosystems and communities. So we see pioneer community, successional community, and then leading to climax community. And this nice flow chart does a really good job of showing if destruction happens, we might end up back at pioneer or successional, and then also environmental influences on this. Here we have our chapter outline. So as we've discussed pretty in-depth during class, succession is the regular series of predictable changes in the plant structure of a community over time. So that's the classic definition. So we're moving towards from barren land or some disrupted land towards a climax community. We're always moving in that direction. So again, as we discussed in class and done with the Pogles, there are two different types of succession. There's primary succession and secondary succession. Primary is beginning with that barren mineral surface or water and lacks of all organisms, where secondary succession is beginning with a disturbance in an ecosystem. So think volcano eruption, fire, some disturbance, maybe human caused, but not necessarily, that's causing a disturbance and then starting back over, leading towards that climax community. So some classic organisms that you're going to see in primary succession are lichens. Lichens are a biological indicator of pH, so they're pretty awesome. They're a fungi and algae or fungi and bacteria relationship. They help break down the rock and accumulated debris, helping form a thin layer of soil, because remember, up to this point we don't even have soil. And then the soil layer begins to support small life form. So lichens are super important. So here we have an example of that barren surface. So this bird obviously flew in from somewhere else that they could have life supported. But here we have a barren surface of no soil, just rock, and we're going to move from this to an ecosystem. All right, here we have another example of primary succession, that barren rock environment. Again, no soil, not even lichen yet, so this is before the lichen. So on this slide, we're talking about terrestrial primary succession. So what's to come next after this thin soil has been established? So annual plants are replaced replace the lichen community. New community is replaced by perennial plants, and perennial plants are replaced by shrubs, and shrubs are replaced by shade-tolerant trees, and then shade-intolerant trees are eventually there. This is going to lead to a climax community. A climax community takes a very long time to form, and once you've reached that climax community, you're going to have a variety of life, both in the plants and animals in that community. So this image is from your book. It's a pretty nice one of showing the pioneer stages over here, leading to the intermediate stages and then the climax community and what you're going to see over time. So succession is not just for terrestrial environments, although that's the examples we've continued to use in class. Aquatic succession can also happen. So all aquatic systems receive inputs from soil particles and organic matter from surrounding land. Eventually, this is going to fill shallow bodies of water, and then we're going to get wet soil established and then eventually move into a terrestrial environment. So here we have from pond to wet meadow, and you can see that we started as a pond here, and we're moving in. Those shallow areas are being filled in by sediment, and eventually plants that are growing, and you can see the sediment change over time. And eventually we're going to have less and less water and more plants, and then the next stage of this would be all land, no water. Secondary succession occurs when an existing community is disturbed or destroyed, so fire, flood, hurricane. Most of these disturbances, most of the soil remains, which is awesome because many of the nutrients necessary for plant growth is still available there. Oh, sorry about that. And nearby damaged communities can serve as a source of seeds and animals, and this tends to be a lot faster than primary succession. Okay, here we have secondary succession. This is an old field and how over time, notice that's 150 years here, that we can go from the annual plants through the perennials, through the shrubs, through the young pine forest to the mature oak forest. So climax communities and biomes. Biomes are a major type of terrestrial climax community with a wide geographic distribution, very wide. It's usually defined by undisturbed natural plant communities. Two main non-biological factors in determining biome, temperature and precipitation, and you must know those. So here we have the biomes of the world, and as you notice, temperature and precipitation is what dictates what type of biome is in the location. Also, altitude and latitude. As altitude increases, the average temperature decreases. And as you move from sea level through mountaintops, it is possible to pass through a series of biomes similar to what you encounter moving from the equator to the North Pole. And here we see vegetation and altitude and latitude. Again, as the elevation increases, we see a colder environment. As we move away from the North Pole, we see a colder environment. In general, climax communities are more stable and have larger, more diverse populations of species than earlier stages of succession. So succession's serial stage, each step is in the process, so that's why we see all those little steps along the way. There are four major factors influencing aquatic ecosystem: the penetration of the light's rays, nature of the bottom substrate, otherwise known as materials at the bottom of the lake, water temperature, and the amount of dissolved materials. So when we're talking about marine ecosystems, we have three key factors. We have the eutrophic zone, which is that upper layer of the ocean where the sun rays penetrate. We have phytoplankton, which are microscopic plants floating in the ocean, and they perform photosynthesis, creating dissolved oxygen. And then zooplankton, which are microscopic animals of many kinds which feed on the phytoplankton. Also with marine ecosystems, we have the various layers. Also, as we've read about, we have the coral reef ecosystems, which are a large number of animals that are built around the exoskeletons around themselves. These are the algae that carry on photosynthesis. As a result, we have huge diverse environments of organisms that are living in these coral reefs. And we've seen that as the temperature and the pH changes outside the range of tolerance, we get the chloral bleaching, which is that the coral reefs that have died. Here we can see the organisms and where they're living based on the ecosystem level. Continuing with our marine ecosystem, we have mangrove swamp ecosystems, which tend to be near shore. Trees are tolerant to high salt concentration, which is important. They actually excrete salt from their leaves, which is super awesome. Extensively developed roots extend beyond the water, and trap sediment in shallow areas develop terrestrial ecosystems. From your reading today, estuaries are shallow, partially enclosed areas where fresh water enters the ocean. They extensively produce because, or the extensive production, because of the areas are shallow, warm, and nutrient rich. Super important. In freshwater ecosystems, we have two broad categories. We have stationary water, so lakes, and running water, like rivers. Lakes and ponds have productivity of the lake is determined by many factors. So the cold temperature reduces the rate of photosynthesis. It also allows organisms to live there that won't otherwise. Shallow equals more photosynthesis because light can penetrate further down. Erosion from land, which equals high nutrients, and dissolved oxygen, which is produced by photosynthesis. So we have lakes that are oligotrophic, which are deep, cold, and nutrient poor. They're also really, really clear. And then we have eutrophic lakes, which are shallow, warm, and nutrient rich. We have biological oxygen demand, which is the amount of oxygen used by decomposers to break down specific amount of organic matter. And we talked about this in the POGIL, that a eutrophic lake tends to have a higher demand of biological oxygen than oligotrophic. So streams and rivers, even though most streams are shallow, it is difficult for photosynthetic organisms to accumulate. Most clear streams are not very productive, and then most streams that have a lot of debris, it's the input from terrestrial sources is where that debris is coming from. Other forms of streams and rivers are swamps, wetlands containing tree able to live on environments that are permanently flooded or flooded most of the year, versus swamps, which are wetlands, or marshes, that are wetlands dominated by grasses and reeds. Okay, in conclusion, we hit all of these topics. Be sure that if you have any questions that you ask tomorrow. Thanks.